In this video, we'll discuss the features on Ted Bundy's face that point to a blending of anger with his sexual urges. Enjoy. Welcome back, everyone. We've got another face reading today, and today is Ted Bundy. So before we jump into this face reading, if you're new to the channel, welcome, but please go up here and watch the 5-minute crash course face reading video I made. That's very important if you've never seen a face reading before. That will give you terms, terminology, what face reading is and what it isn't. And if you're finding value in my content, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification and share this with someone who you think will find it interesting, because I really want this channel to grow, and sharing it with people is what makes that happen. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Also, my wife, my daughter got sick, and they've been fighting it off, something fierce. The only dent in my armor, my immune system is pretty bulletproof, but the only dent I have is a little bit of a cough. So if I cough a few times during this video, I apologize, but it's me kind of fending off what they have. But I haven't gotten sick, luckily. So let's talk about Ted Bundy. So whenever you read a serial killer, it's not the most pleasant thing, at least for me, because reading a face like this and seeing a face, seeing the components that make up who and what a person is when they've done something really awful, it's not particularly enjoyable to read. But I think one of the reasons that it's important to read pathological faces is because you want to think of face reading as part of Gong Fu. And when I say Gong Fu, I mean the practice of self-defense. So Chinese medicine, face reading, these are all intermeshed, and martial arts and all of these things that come out of the East are blended. And you want to think of face reading as a line of defense also. We want to defend ourselves against things and people that are not good for us. So when we study serial killers, we get to look into pathology, and that's very important because you want to pick up the cues and the markers on someone's face that could be potentially dangerous. So let's start off by looking at his face, and there were a few things that leapt out at me. So first and foremost, if we look at his eyebrows, this is something that I've talked about in other videos about the wood element and how the wood element houses the function of the liver and the gallbladder system. So the liver regulates and processes, on the positive side, kindness and vigor. It's how much zest we have for life, how hard we pursue our dreams, and how kind and compassionate we can be. That's the positive side. The negative is hostility, anger, frustration, all of that. And so when we see strong wood features, what that means is that the person has the capacity, technically the potential for both. And all humans do, right? All of us can be aggressive and all of us can be compassionate. But you want to think the intensity of the features, how dominant they are. That's what you want to focus on and what you want to think about, because that gives a marker. It gives a clue or an insight into the energetic of how that system is working. But you have to read all of these different layers of the face. So with this, the eyebrows are a wood feature, which means a strong liver. When we see the hairs connecting here, what they call the unibrow, so when we see this starting to happen here, this is seen as a surplus of wood energetics. This means extra juice or extra current running through the liver system. So the light side of that is, yes, these people can be very compassionate and very altruistic in a certain sense and be very kind. And that's the positive side. The negative side is that you can see a flared temper, someone who is overly aggressive, overly angry. And when you look at Ted Bundy and the profile of the killings that he was partaking in, very violent, very aggressive, and he had a lot of sexual aggression. And he had apparently a lot of his killings, and reading about him was sexually oriented, and there was a thrill in that for him. And we want to think that people with strong wood features are going to have typically an association with a strong sex drive or a strong creative drive. And the reason for this, I've talked about this in other videos, but the liver channel, the liver meridian, the channel pathway of which all of this stuff is based off of in Chinese medicine, the liver pathway runs around the sex organs. It goes down the front of the body, it wraps around the sex organs, and then goes down the front of the legs out to the big toe. And so you want to think these channel pathways, the wood element pathway, is going to show up on the face. And so when we see a surplus of wood, these are the mechanisms and the functions that we want to be looking at. So for Ted Bundy, he's got this unibrow. He's got this hair that's growing between here, which means a surplus of a capacity for anger in his particular case. So that's one. The eyebrows are pretty strong and dominant on him, so that's something that points to that wood energetic. Now, what is interesting about Ted Bundy is when you read about him, a lot of women found him very attractive. And so this is one of those cases where his face is interesting because you want to think when you're looking at a person's face and a person like this, a serial killer, he has some technically quote unquote good features, features that are favorable in the context of face reading. So he's got joy lines. He's got these pretty well-defined lines right here. When he smiles, he gets these. These are typically seen as something favorable, but as I've always said, you cannot get into the pitfall of looking at a feature and saying, oh, this person has that feature, therefore that's good. You have to look at the entirety of the face. You have to take into account the Shen, the Qi of the face, and the Jing, the constitutional essence. So with him, these markers, when someone has these, subconsciously, it's said that in the context of face reading, people find these attractive because we associate these things with joy and happiness. Someone's eyes wrinkling up when they smile is technically a good thing. But when you see this on a serial killer, that means there's a joy in the life terrain of a person. So you look at Ted Bundy's life and he was killing people. This, unfortunately, very sickly, in the sickly sense, means that there was a joy in the path he was taking. Not great and not favorable in any capacity. So he's got these joy lines, and also part of why I think he was found attractive. By definition standards, I don't think he's particularly handsome, but women found him attractive. He was also very articulate. Now, we're going to talk about his nose also, because he's got kind of a pointy nose, and in certain photos you can kind of see when he's at the right angle, his nose kind of points down. My nose does this too, and believe me, I don't like pointing out a correlation between Ted Bundy's face and mine. But the mechanism of the nose, okay, the nose is seen as, it's a metal feature, okay? And when there's any kind of pointed down nature, what it's said is that the nose can sort of relate to the articulation of words, and a person can be cutting with their words. In the same way, an eagle's beak points and is hooked, right? Because they use that beak to carve into things and to cut things out and to pull things out. And so you can see this manifest in a lot of different ways. When we see the nose like this means that the person can peck and they can be articulate and they can cut into a person verbally also. Now you might say, well, why? Why the nose? Well, the nose is a mountain, and the nose particularly relates to the lungs, and the lungs relate to the breath and therefore speech. This is why the heart also, the spirit, okay, the heart and the lungs share a close geography. This is also why they say the tone of voice relates to the spirit of a person. So the nose, we see this kind of beaked, pointed feature. When you listen to him in his interviews, he's very articulate. He's well-spoken. He's able to put his words well together. And this kind of brings me to his forehead. Now, I've talked about this before, but the forehead relates to the mind. And when we see the forehead lines connect here, typically what that means is that the lessons of the 20s have been relatively well integrated. They've taken some lessons and learned from them, and they're able to apply them in their life. But it also means cohesiveness of thought. It means that the person can articulate their ideas and their words well. So again, I have this feature. Believe me, I don't like finding parallels, but I have some favorable features. But you want to think, good features, okay? You have to read them in the context of the spirit of a person. So Ted Bundy has these lines that show up here. They connect. This is technically favorable. It means he puts his ideas well. He puts them well together. He's able to form his thoughts, articulate his ideas. Now, if you look at my Joe Biden face reading, his forehead is a mess. And if you haven't noticed, Joe Biden has trouble with his words. He fumbles all over the place. His mind does not articulate ideas very well. Part of that's age, part of that's a lot of different things. Watch that video and you can go check that out. But he's got some favorable features. So I find this interesting because, again, these are technically good features, but the spirit is dark. And when the spirit is dark, these features now become dark, and they take a dark turn into something very bad collectively. Now, his mouth, he's pretty tight-lipped. He doesn't have a very full earth mouth. So what we see with thin-lipped people oftentimes is a high sex drive, a high libido. And the thinking is that when a person's lips are very full, a person with full lips can still have a high sex drive if they have other features that relate to it. But the mouth relates to the five senses. And so you want to think of, You want to think of the mouth, okay, and the energy that comes out of the face a lot like a beam of light, like a laser beam. The East says that the spirit comes out of the face like a light beam, like it comes out like a laser. And so the shape of our features change the aperture. They change the shape of how the light comes out. And so when we see tight-lipped people, there's a compression in the senses. That means there's a tightening of the senses, and the mouth relates to pleasure seeking. So when we see a tight-lipped thing, it's almost like an extraction of pleasure seeking. This translates to high libido, high sex drive, these kinds of things. And Ted Bundy and his propensity for killing and his relationship with women was definitely very sexual in nature. So we see this tight-lipped energy on a face like this relates to this likely an extraction of sexual energy in the killing process, which is, something really terrible to think about, but that's the nature of the beast when you're looking at his face. Now, his Shen, the spirit, this is a consistent theme in face reading and something that my late teacher, Lillian Bridges, used to really stress. She believed that a lot of face reading comes down to reading the Shen. Yes, the features are going to clue you into a person, but reading the Shen is really where you get to the core. It's like the crux or the central cogwheel of a person's inner workings. And you really want to pay attention to the Shen. So Ted Bundy's Shen moves quite a bit. It's very adaptable. It's very manipulative in a sense. If you watch his interviews and when he articulates his ideas in a very creepy sense, when I was listening to him, I thought, wow, he's well-spoken. He makes sense. And there's something about him that is borderline appealing in the way he thinks because he's able to articulate his ideas. There's something alluring about it. And this is coming from someone who knows who he is. You almost start to feel for him a little bit. And that's really crazy to think about. So his Shen moves around quite a bit. If you look at some of his mug shots, like this one here, you'll see there's kind of this dull, cold affect. When you see him smiling, you see the features kind of wrinkle up. There's a lot of fire there. There's some pointiness. He's got the joy lines. He's got the pointy eyebrows at the end, kind of a pointy nose. There's definitely a pointed energy, which means there's some fire and some warmth. People, like moths to a flame, we're drawn to fiery features. We like to be around fire. We like to put our hands out, around the campfire. It's the same kind of thing. So Ted Bundy, as he got older, did very well with women. He was very, very charming, very charismatic, funny, quick-witted, all fire related. But when you look at his face collectively, there is something in the Shen that is off. And if you go to my video, if you haven't seen it, it's Know a Trustworthy Face in 30 seconds. If you check that video out, there's a technique on how to invert a triangle, the fire shape, over a person's face, and you can track the overall vibration of how a person is going to make you feel. Do you inherently trust them, and are they collectively trustworthy? When you put that triangle over Ted Bundy's face and you look at the core features, which are the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. And in a nutshell, in that video, I talk about making a triangle from here down to about here and isolating that and focusing on this middle eye, and then having your peripheral vision track the rest of the triangle, what's happening on the inside of that triangle. Ted Bundy's spirit, that Shen, is something really, I don't know, there's something off. When I look at it, it doesn't give me a good feeling. And so you can try that on his face and tune in, watch that video and apply the technique to his face, and I think you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about. Now, there's this one picture here, and this is spooky. In his last interview before he received the electric chair, that's how they executed him. They are talking to him about a 12-year-old child that he murdered, and when they ask him about it, he's very withdrawn about the question, and then right at the end of the question, when they're asking him about this 12-year-old, and he said he can't talk about it, and then he gives this look right here. He looks up and he gives this look. And that right there is, I think that right there is the essence of the killer. That is the killer instinct, and that is the killer's face right there. Interestingly enough, too, in reading about him, when people said, women and men were talking about Ted Bundy, they would get into conversations and they said he was the nicest guy. And then occasionally, if you hit a button or you hit some topic with Ted Bundy that really fired him up, they said they watched him go from a regular guy into something terrifying, and it was consistent. People said there was a flash, and it was interesting the way people described it. They said it was like this flare-up of energy would come out of his face, and you would see that something was not right. And when people saw that, if women got that look and they saw it before he deployed that during the killing, these are the women that backed off of him. They said something happened during a conversation where they would see this look, and they thought, oh God, I need to get out of here. I can't be a part of this. And so I think this is that look. And I think he hid that look until it was probably the time of killing, when something else, conjures up in the person. But I do find it interesting, and his Shen moves around quite a bit. He goes from charismatic to dull affect. And the other thing to track in Shen is to remember a lot of this face reading, and when we're looking at people's faces, we're looking at them frontal. A lot of these pictures are frontal, they're straightforward. And the thing I want you to remember is when you are looking at the Shen and you're tracking it on someone else's face, in a conversation, people are going to look around, right? They're going to do this and they're going to glance away, and you want to track the angling of the face, because you will get these little clues and insights into a slightly different angle. You're going to see the curvature of the face. You're going to see how the energy comes out in a different way. And when I see Ted Bundy from a couple different shots here where he looks off to the side, there's something about that face. There's something that, at least for me, and maybe it's because I'm a face reader, but when I see that face, that is a different presentation, and something about his face makes me a bit more nervous than when I'm just looking at it straight on. There's something kind of Cro-Magnon and aggressive about it, and you want to pay attention to people's faces like this. You want to think about this in the context of art as well. So I was an art major. I went to school. Both my parents were good at art. I was a sculpture, ceramics, and drawing major. I was geared up to be a sculptor, and I did ceramics. I did all kinds of things, welding and illustration, all kinds of stuff. And one of the things I learned in art school was you have to look at a sculpture from many different angles, and that's part of how you gauge how good it is. And I would say, again, life imitates art and vice versa. You want to look at faces from different angles. Look at them. Really tune in and pay attention, because there's this image online about looking at a cylinder, and it creates two different shadows. So if you look at it from one side, it creates, I think, a square, and if you look at it from the other side, it creates a circle. And when the light hits like this, they're saying both of these truths can exist at the same time, which is true for people. But the same goes for faces. Look at them from different angles, and you're going to get an insight into a person's face. Don't just track the frontal. Track every angle, especially when you're talking to someone. Now, his public persona, his natural face, and his inner persona, this was interesting, because when I look at these, and I've talked about this in other videos recently, there's a congruency. These people look related. And the big determining factor that's different on all of these faces is the nose, the central mountain of the face. So if you look at his public persona, it's much wider and broader. And so when we think about features, the more broad features are, the wider they are, they're a bit more aligned with openness and receptivity. And now this was true in the context of women. Women liked him. He had a slightly more open face. But when you look at his inner persona, that nose almost comes down to a needle nose point. And so if you think about what I was talking about before in the nature of like the words and that central mountain, that is something very pointy. There is something very sharp about that. And so you put this nose, that inner persona, incredibly sharp beak-like nose on a guy like this, that means that there is something very cutting about the words and the energy of a person. And for him, unfortunately, it translates into murder. So this is my read on Ted Bundy. If there's other people you would like me to read, please let me know. And just for the people that are watching consistently, please know that Taylor Swift is coming up. And also, who was the other person? Kurt Cobain has come up a number of times. So those are going to be in the docket soon. But I try to stick to face readings where people are trending also, not just people of the past. But I'm also listening to you guys because I like to co-create this kind of content. So that's pretty much everything I've got. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.